So listen to this. They say Mesut Ozil was lazy, a luxury player, a relic of a softer era. Yet for years, he was the most reliable final pass specialist in elite football, the guy who made world-class forwards look like they had extra seconds in their heads. Everyone believes Özil disappeared because he declined. But what if the real story is darker and simpler? Özil didn't vanish. The role he mastered did. This is not a story about defending Mesut Ozil as a person, and it's not an attempt to pretend his career had no flaws. This is a case file about something larger than one player. It's about how football quietly erased a role, and how the players who were born for that role became easy targets once the game moved on. Özil wasn't just a number 10. He was almost a pure version of it. A player who lived between the lines, who slowed the game down while everyone else was speeding up, who created danger not with power or volume, but with timing and angles. For years, that kind of intelligence was priceless, but modern football stopped rewarding specialists. It began demanding players who could do everything at once: press, recover, cover space, then still create. And once that shift became the norm, the artist was no longer evaluated by what he produced with the ball, but by what he failed to give without it. In that world, the question was never whether Özil could still create. The question became whether football still wanted someone whose entire value depended on creation alone. Start with the version of Mesut Ozil that people slowly rewrote out of history. At Real Madrid, Özil wasn't a myth or a luxury experiment. He was a structural advantage. He didn't just pass the ball forward, he passed the moment forward. Every time he received possession, the game tilted. Defenders hesitated, runners accelerated, and spaces that didn't exist a second earlier suddenly opened. That wasn't flair, that was system intelligence. Real Madrid were built to amplify it. They had runners who stretched the pitch, finishers who attacked space, midfielders who absorbed defensive work so Özil didn't have to. His job wasn't to run endlessly. His job was to decide faster than anyone else on the pitch. And in that environment, he was devastating, because the classic number 10 only works when a team accepts a simple trade. We protect you, and you break the game for us. That trade still existed then. Football still allowed a specialist to be a specialist. Özil didn't need to win duels or press center backs to justify his place, because his passes already justified everything. He was the connector between chaos and control. But when he moved to Arsenal, the league he entered was already changing, even if the narrative hadn't caught up yet. The Premier League was becoming faster, more physical, but more importantly, more systematic. Pressing was no longer emotional running, it became coordinated pressure. Transitions became weapons. Space became something you suffocated, not something you waited to defend. At Arsenal, Özil still did what he had always done. He found pockets, he slipped passes through lines, he created chances that looked easy only because he made them easy. But the structure around him was weaker, less consistent, and less able to carry a specialist. When chances weren't finished, his impact became invisible. When results dropped, attention shifted away from systems and onto symbols. And Özil, calm, quiet, almost detached in his body language, became the perfect symbol to blame. Not because he was the worst performer, but because he was the easiest to frame. Effort started being measured by distance covered, not by decisions made. Running started to look like responsibility. Stillness started to look like guilt. This is where the conflict truly begins, because football culture confuses movement with commitment. A player who sprints looks like he cares. A player who glides looks like he's hiding. But Özil's intensity was never physical, it was cognitive. He played the game seconds ahead, not meters harder. And as the Premier League continued its tactical evolution, the spaces he needed shrank. Midfields became more athletic, defensive lines became tighter, pressing triggers punished hesitation. Suddenly, the classic number 10 wasn't just unnecessary, he was exposed. Not because he was worse than before, but because the environment stopped forgiving what it once celebrated. Here's the moment where the entire case flips. Mesut Ozil didn't simply decline as a footballer. Football redesigned itself in a way that made his strengths feel like weaknesses. The same calm that once signaled control began to look like indifference. The same patience that once opened defenses began to look like hesitation. Nothing about Özil fundamentally changed. What changed was the cost of carrying a specialist in a game that was becoming more machine than orchestra. Modern pressing systems don't allow exceptions. If one player doesn't trigger pressure at the right moment, the entire structure cracks. Opponents escape, transitions explode, and coaches lose trust. In that environment, every player becomes a lever in a machine, and machines don't tolerate parts that only do one thing, no matter how beautiful that thing is. The classic number 10 used to be protected by the team. Now the team is protected from the classic number 10. That's why the debate around Özil always felt moral instead of tactical. People asked why he didn't try harder, as if effort alone could turn a specialist into a hybrid. But adapt into what exactly? A pressing 8? A tracking winger? A box-to-box midfielder? Those are different roles, different sports almost. Özil wasn't failing an upgrade. He was facing an extinction event. And extinction events don't look dramatic. They don't come with one bad season or one fatal injury. They happen quietly as systems evolve and values shift until one day a player is still doing the same things he's always done, but the game no longer waits for them. Zoom out, and this case stops being about Mesut Ozil entirely. It becomes a story about how football decides what kind of intelligence it values. For decades, the game made room for players whose contribution couldn't be measured in kilometers or tackles. The classic number 10 existed because teams accepted imbalance. They accepted that one player would do less defensive work in exchange for doing the most difficult creative work of all, turning possession into inevitability. But modern football began rejecting imbalance. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Margins got smaller, opponents got smarter, coaches got less time. And in that pressure cooker, reliability became more valuable than inspiration. The sport didn't stop loving creativity, it redistributed it. Instead of one artist in the center, creativity spread across fullbacks, wide forwards, advanced eights. Everyone was asked to contribute a little instead of one player being allowed to contribute everything in one phase. That shift made teams harder to press, harder to break, harder to predict. But it also changed what fans learned to admire. We started celebrating work rate as virtue. We started equating running with leadership. We started trusting data over intuition. And slowly, without announcing it, football rewrote the definition of a great player. This is why players like Özil trigger discomfort. They remind us of a version of the game that asked us to slow down and watch. A version where intelligence didn't shout, it whispered. When that version faded, it wasn't replaced by something worse, it was replaced by something more efficient. And efficiency doesn't care about nostalgia, it only cares about outcomes. In that world, the artist doesn't get a farewell. He gets reclassified. Luxury, risk, problem. So the disappearance of the classic number 10 wasn't a failure of individuals, it was a structural decision made by the sport itself. And once that decision was made, players like Özil weren't wrong. They were simply early casualties of a game that decided it no longer had time to wait for them. So, was Mesut Ozil outdated, or did football change too fast? If you want the simplest answer, you can say he should have adapted, run more, pressed harder, become something else. But that answer avoids the harder truth. Ozil's value was never about volume, it was about precision. It was never about intensity in motion, but intensity in thought. He was the kind of player who made football feel slower for his teammates and faster for his opponents. And that kind of intelligence doesn't disappear overnight. Modern football didn't reject Ozil because he lacked talent. It rejected him because it no longer builds teams around singular creators. The game moved toward collective engines, interchangeable parts, and constant pressure. In that world, a player who needs protection is no longer a priority, no matter how rare his gift is. So Ozil didn't fail the game. The game simply stopped making space for what he represented. And maybe that's the real discomfort of this case file. Because if Ozil was wrong, then all we need to believe in is effort and adaptation. But if Ozil was simply outpaced by the direction of the sport, then we have to accept something colder and more unsettling. Sometimes brilliance doesn't fade. Sometimes the world just decides it doesn't need that kind of brilliance anymore. And that leaves one final question, not just about Mesut Ozil, but about football itself. When the artist disappears, do we actually gain something, or do we just stop noticing what we've lost?